celebrating 15 years of Young Turks.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Young Turks. On the show today, we are going to be dissecting Budget 2017. We'll try to understand and reconcile what it meant for startups and investors. Let's start by taking a look at some of the key highlights from Budget 2017 from a startup point of view. So let's get right into it. Joining us on the show today to put things in perspective, Sharat Sharma of iSpirit, a software product think tank and advocacy group. Sharat's joining us from our Bangalore studios. From Gurgaon, I have Vineet Singh, who's the Chief Business Officer at MobiKwik. And he's going to be kind of bringing in a perspective on digital payments. That was, of course, one of the big thrust areas of the budget. From our Bombay studio, we have Ashish Fafadia, who's the Chief Financial Officer at Bloom Ventures, an early stage VC fund. And with me in the studio, I have Veer Mishra, who's the co-founder and CEO of Neuron, a Delhi-based machine learning startup. Yeah. So I'm going to actually begin this conversation with you, Veer.
Awesome.
One, because you're the youngest of all of us in the studio today. And also because we caught up last week, where we actually did a preview of what to expect, what early stage startups were expecting from the budget. And couple of things that you enumerated were do away with all blanket sort of exemptions on taxes. That's a miss. You also asked for an extension of the time frame of the income tax holiday. That's a hit. That's happened.
There,
And the other thing that you wanted was rationalization around ESOPs. So take us through, Veer, from an early stage startup point of view, what were your hits and misses?
Sure. I think if you look at this overall, like, it's a 6 on 10 kind of a budget, right, for startups, if I say so. It's not that bad. But the two things that were missed, right, the first was, like, in the secondary sale. Right. Correct. When a startup founder is, like, trying to do a secondary sale, right, and the tax slab on that is very huge. It's still there, right. One thing that I wanted to be there was, like, we are going into the era of, like, digital payments and everything, but there was just a slight mention of cybersecurity, right, but there was no mention about the research grants that startups can get or avail for creating those services. Because looking forward, we are talking about a digital economy, right? So we need a backbone, right, that is powered by cybersecurity or machine learning.
So Sharat, tell us what the hits and misses were for you.
We've been looking at it in iSpirit is to say that there are a bunch of things that are hygiene factors that need to be addressed very quickly. These are factors where essentially government gets out of the way or provides clarity so that the startup doesn't have to focus a lot of attention in making those basic things happen. And in consultation with everybody else in the ecosystem, we kind of created a priority list of those items. Those are 34 items. They are in something called Stay in India checklist. And there have been a fair amount of items that have been addressed over the time. For example, convertibles were not possible earlier. They've been addressed, and escrows were a big problem. So if you sold your company, then escrow was a big problem. So that's been addressed earlier. But there are a number of other things that remain pending. And we were hoping that we would have made much more progress on them in this budget than we have. So those are.
So in the context of the Stay in India checklist, Sharat, I'm just going to press you on this. What were some of the things you mentioned? 34 items. Out of those 34, how many have been addressed in the last year, and specifically in this budget?
The current count is actually 20. Yeah. So in the budget, only 3 were addressed, and now, including those 3, we are up to a count of 29 right now, which are at various stages where the government has shown intent to address them. What we find is that between the intent to an actual, addressing them often takes many months, sometimes 6 months. There are 5 that are red which haven't been resolved. Angel tax is one of them. Capital gains tax is another. So those need to be addressed, and all these 5 are actually Ministry of Finance. So
Alright.
other ministries have taken care of these, but
Okay.
Ministry of Finance hasn't.
Okay. All right. So Ashish, coming to you from an early stage venture capital fund point of view, you also are sometimes the first money into a startup. What were the hits and misses from Budget 2017 for you?
Coming specifically to your point on hits, is that they clarified about the fact that there will be a seamless conversion on preference shares going forward. We definitely need that clarification on how they will handle it for the preference shares and mezzanine instruments of the past. But at least the fact that there is a clear intent to address it is a very positive step. I think the angel tax not being addressed was a clear miss. And also the fact that they're talking about the exemptions for 3 out of the 7 years. I've said this, for funded startups it is not a material item, because they are going to be in deployment mode and catch up on finances anyway. So it is, these are positive developments, but these are all incremental and marginal benefits.
Especially on the count of the angel tax, I think this has been a bugbear for at least a few years now.
Yeah.
And Ashish, if you want
That's
to get
right.
into and kind of just break this down and help us analyze and understand why this needs to go.
For angels or corporates, when they invest money into startups, if they are investing at a value which is higher than a certain benchmark which has to be given by the valuation report, the government seeks to tax the surplus. Now they have provided that you can go with a valuation report and submit it on record, so that even that would be addressed, but that is not fully helpful. The departments are not going with an intent of trying to tax it and go after them, but there's definitely lack of clarity at their end also. So they want to do their bits to ensure that they are not caught off guard at the further process in their own internal audit and all that.
As Chief Business Officer of MobiKwik, one of India's largest mobile payment wallets, you've also been an entrepreneur, built up your own company before joining out at MobiKwik. Take us through what you made of Budget 2017. For you, what were the highlights that really stood out?
I'm a little happy they have moved forward on the startup side in terms of what they did last year. But the kind of expectations that were set and the startup movement that happened over the last 18 months, etc. and so on, I think the expectations were that a clear level playing field will be set up with clear guidelines that will differentiate startups and entrepreneurs in the making as well.
Want to come over here to some of the issues that were addressed. One was the reduction on the corporate tax payable from 33% to 25% for companies with revenues of under 50 crores. And another point was a reduction for individual businesses with turnover of less than 2 crores will now pay a presumptive tax of just 6% versus 8% earlier. Sharath, for you, where is this targeted? Are we finally seeing the government recognize that a large part of the country's growth is going to come from small and medium businesses, and we can kind of perhaps put in startups into that bucket as well?
India is at a very interesting kind of an experiment where it is saying that this whole digitization is not to help India one. People like you and me, all of us on the panel, people who have good jobs and are relatively prosperous. It is actually meant to help India 2 and India 3. That India 2 is willing to now embrace WhatsApp. They are getting to the WhatsApp stage. If you can get them now to the payment stage, through UPI and wallets and things like that, and merchants can embrace this, then for the first time they'll be in a position to get flow-based credit. And that has not been available to them in the banking system today, because the banking system is really about collateral-based, asset-based credit, which of course, India too doesn't have that collateral to be able to avail of that credit. Now, sadly, most of our startup ecosystem is blind to this. they are captivated by only selling to India one. Every brand that you can think of is actually catering to India one. Very few of them are focusing on India 2 and India 3. But I think over time that will change. They'll wake up to this, and hopefully they'll participate in this upcoming revolution that is going to.
I think what you're saying is that finally startup founders or entrepreneurs might actually discover a much bigger market than they presently have in just tier 1 India.
Rather than just focusing on the metros, now they can actually focus on the mass.
And this is just some of the things that we're going to discuss in the next segment. So take a break now and we'll be back soon.
Celebrating 15 years of Young Turks.